Hello. Dear participants, we will start the stream in 2 minutes. It will go live in a few minutes.
Наши. Слышно? Раз, 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 раз. Раз. Раз, 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 раз. Раз, раз. Слышно?
Сейчас, да.
Есть, все, отлично. Значит, мы говорим близко. Hello. Great. Мы готовы. Как перед стартом, just before the outbreak of running. The short distance.
We will do everything you tell us.
Okay, right. And if I tell nothing, just do something, please.
We'll start in a few seconds. Мы начнем через несколько моментов. Нет, Волх сейчас приедет через 20 минут.
Начинайте.
Shall we start?
Yes.
Okay, I'm very pleased to welcome you all here at a very unusual combined online-offline event here in the Baltic House Theatre Festival. And I'm very pleased not to see but to feel our friends and colleagues online and many spectators and audience just who joined us here in this wonderful space. I remember at one of the conferences, which was absolutely online, there was a big space, no spectators, just winds going here and there, and many photographers running. There were, they played main roles in the online broadcasting. But here it is wonderful. We have offline spectators. We have our online audiences. And I would like to start with the announcement that this is a round table, which is called the Digitalization of International Cooperation. What should theaters expect in the era of new globalization? And this roundtable is a part of a big international conference, which is called Theatre and Virtual Reality. It's opening now by our meeting today and going to last for 3 days. And the conference is a part of a bigger event, the 30th Jubilee Baltic House International Theatre Festival. Lots of grand events here, and that's why we start with the welcome address from Sergei Shub, who is the Director General of the Theatre Festival, Baltic House, and the host of today's roundtable and all grand events these days. Thank you so much, and please join
Спасибо.
us.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Добрый день.
Dear colleagues, hello, all the participants of our round table, of our conference, and all of those who are present today in the Baltic House, and possibly the major part of those who are together with us today and who exist in online format. I would like to welcome all of you wherever you are, because today you are our guests and we are discussing the problem which is really troubles and worries all of those who works in the sphere of the visual arts. First of all, I would like to greet and welcome and to thank for participation in our event and conversation the director of the International Institute of Theatre, Tobias Bianconi. This is a big proud for us his participation in our round table, as actually every guest today is very dear for us, and your opinion is very important for us. The matter is that situation in the world, which is called pandemic situation or pandemia, of course, this is such a borderline close to the wartime situation or warlike. But if we go back to the history, then we can remember that any war brought to life technologies, very high technologies that first originally were directed on, focused on solving very specific problems, but then later became the legacy for the peaceful time for mankind. So today, to some extent, we are really were forced to shift for the online work. And of course, we're all children of the live theater, but I'm pretty sure that many of those things that we've prepared and for today in the epoch of pandemic, and all those skills both the audience and the theater has gained will be needed and will be developed artistically in the times, in the when new normal reality will come up to us, when the audience again will fill our halls of the theaters, and when we'll have the same breathe in the audience, between the stage and the audience, and all these practices will be required in the future. So that's why there is a very big essence of our conference in that. So the Baltic House, the festival Baltic House, it's a jubilee festival. We are celebrating 30th anniversary already, and of course the conditions of pandemic conditions changed the format of it. So our foreign guests didn't have a chance to come to St. Petersburg. They have been existing in the online format. We show the performances of our Baltic friends from the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. We showed their performances in online format. These are our constant, regular guests. These are names very well known all over our country and abroad. We also showed performances from Switzerland, and this program made a very big interest among the audiences. We could see it by our surveys. The big part of the program is going on in the real time. At the moment, we have Theatre Satyricon and the Youth Theatre and the School of the Modern Play, the theatres from Catherineburg. The theatre of director Kalida was very successfully showing his performances, plus a number of conferences, like, for example, Necros's readings. That was the first time when we experienced that practice, and we planned to have it in a real time, but unfortunately we had to do it in a online format. But still, we will have that project. We plan to continue with that project, dedicated to the directing of the modern times. We live a full life, but of course we've got plenty of problems. The task of this conference, of this meeting, of course, first of all, is to follow those and to see and to contemplate about those problems and tendencies that we have in the theater today, in the real existence, and to try to reflect and think how all that experience that we have gained already, how we can use it in the future. Though, of course, we will never forget the real theater, the theater that shares one breath between the audience and the stage, will remain the main task for and issue for all of us, actors and audience. But nevertheless, I would like to congratulate all of us that we gathered together here and to wish both us and you very successful work. Итак, мы продолжаем и позвольте...
Helping me not to be alone in the Presidium. This is Günther Hasenkampf, who's the director of Goethe Institute in St. Petersburg, and Lisa Rozova, a program director of M-Art Foundation, Russia. So we go on, and let me again do some announcements, short announcements to the audience before we start our discussions. We have two broadcasting channels. The first is Vkontakte, which is in Russian. If you prefer Russian language, please go to Vkontakte. We have a broadcasting in YouTube channel, which is mostly in English, in Russian too. This is a mixed channel, but if you prefer English, please go to YouTube channel. And to our many spectators who have joined us, please, you're welcome to make notices in chat and ask questions. Please write your questions, and they will be produced orally during our discussions, so they will not be lost. The third person to accompany me in the Presidium should be Philippe Voulach from Moscow too, but he's now offline and in the traffic jam. He's going to join us in half an hour. Let me start with a few notes of a moderator, a short speech, and the last thing that I'm going to tell you before we start our work is the time allotted for each speech is about 10 minutes for each speaker, excluding the keynote lecture, which is going to be the next after me, which is by Tobias Biancone. We expect dear Tobias to speak for 15 minutes. Let us now start, and let me make a few notes. I think that specialists in digital economy say that the global shift from the offline to the online was to happen inevitably, even without the pandemic. The corona crisis accelerated it. In Russia, what was planned to develop for years in normal scenario flew in just a few months, and we all flew into the online. This shift required from us not only technical equipment, but rethinking the basics of our normal activities, agenda planning, everyday habits, etc. The online was put in the center of our working day. Therefore, many people say they experienced a fundamental change in their life outlook. They used to take online communication as optional, and now they find it obligatory. The social effects of the shift are now studied by sociologists. First of all, the amount of time that we spend that is spent by very different people in social networks has increased a lot. Second, we have noticed if you work online, the working day increases and the boundary between work and leisure disappear. The online eats up our leisure. Third, the obligation to use instruments of electronic communication sharpened the problem of digital disparity. If you cannot provide yourself with full access to digital resources, your life perspectives diminish. In my experience, this was particularly the case of students and school children in online education. On the other hand, who gained profits from the shift to online in the first place? Providers of online education, I mean programs that were designed for the online from the very outset, and not just usual educational programs that shifted in online. Second, the online delivery services. And third, streaming services. In spring 2020, if an organization already had products that were good for online delivery, the shift to the online went smoothly for this organization. Theatres experienced all these too. At the beginning of the isolation in spring 2020, the first thing they did was the online streaming or broadcasting of performances from their digital archives. Theatres whose archives were big enough and whose IT departments were strong enough could quickly establish access to their videos and deliver them to their audiences. But after the 10th or 20th streaming session, the question inevitably arose. Shall we just wait until the normal time comes? If so, we continue to digitize performances and deliver them to audiences, and wait until we return to the offline. But what if the offline is the new norm? In this case, theatre activities should be rethought. Theatres have to get ready not only to digitize and broadcast, but to create online. Philosophically thinking, what is the problem? Most traditional theatres take digital products as copies of their proper products, live performances. But today, there are a lot of spectators who would prefer digital copies due to safety reasons and just because HD things do look very modern and attractive. Each spectator decides for himself or herself what to prefer, and the choice depends on education and cultural habits. If you choose digital copies of performances, theatres would not be absolutely happy. But if a performance is created in the digital sphere, with its great variety of technical instruments and unlimited opportunities to interact with the audience, then do we still have the theatre in the digital sphere? Or just a shadow copy of the theatre? These questions come from classical aesthetics. Are they still up to date? We definitely have a generation gap. The older generation, and I'm not sure how much older, do not find the theatre in online creations. But the younger generation do not have any problem to use the term theatre for online things, HD streaming, communication assisted by computers, and so on. There have been so many studies of theatre in modernity. We sometimes started even to think we learned everything about theatre, or nearly everything about theatre. Now we have to rebuild our philosophy of theatre again from blank page, from scratch, and this fact I find just amazing. Today we will together pay attention to many aspects of the new turn of globalization. During the isolation, we started to communicate more because we really felt the greatest demand for communication. We did not feel it that strong before the isolation. This fundamental demand is going to stimulate theatre work. And the work in the field of international cooperation too. The world has become closer. And within the channels of digital communication, now, it is easier than ever to overcome borders and cultural differences, to build bridges. Our round table of today, which is spread all over the world, is itself a wonderful example of it. Thanks again to those who've joined us. And let us start our work. I would ask all speakers to speak slightly more slowly than you normally do, because we have translators working, and it's going to be easier for them to translate if you speak slowly. And I'm happy to give the virtual floor, so to say, to Tobias Biancone, Director General of the International Theatre Institute and President of the Network for Higher Education in Performing Arts. Tobias, are you speaking from Shanghai or Paris?
Tobias, are you talking to us from Shanghai or Paris? Where are you? Tobias, can you hear us? Tobias, can you hear us? Okay, perfect. So the question was, are you joining us from Paris or Shanghai today?
Switzerland. I'm in Switzerland, in Bern.
Great, great. So please, you're welcome to deliver your key.
So you can start with your keynote speech, which is called the New Era of Internationalism.
Okay. First of all, I want to express a warm welcome to all the participants of this online and offline conference, The Digitalization of International Cooperation. What should theater expect in the era of new globalization, organized by the Baltic House? In my words, I address to you, I do not want to take up all the issues that we were an effect of since the beginning of this year. I rather would like to give you my reflections about the essence and the role of theater and the questions that evolve by what is going on around us, locally and globally. And I want to share with you what I mean by a new era of internationalism. What is the essence of theater? Let's first look at the adaptability that theater has shown in the past on a global scale. The first sources of theater, according to my opinion, may be observed at the beginning of life on this planet. If you imagine that you would have lived during that time, you would have been able to experience people who use their facial expression and their body to tell each other a story. The first mimes were communicating and entertaining each other. Maybe after learning to use language, the first storytellers were expressing their experiences and imaginations to friends and others. But then, jumping ahead in time, you can imagine after ages passed, a special kind of theater was developed that has enriched our lives, even in the recent past. This is the theater that you are witnessing today. You also could imagine having witnessed through the ages that theater developed from a simple mono-performance to a highly complex form, as we can observe it today, with an intensely developed interaction of voice, movement, audio design, light design, scenic design, drama, dance, music, singing, architecture, acrobatics, and multimedia elements. And what is of interest is that theater has adapted itself always, using the possibilities of the times. Just think about the amphitheater of Epidaurus, where the architects used their knowledge to make the voices of the actors heard at every seat of the outdoor edifice. In some countries, theater entered the life of people when it was played outside, for instance, by touring troops on a marketplace, for instance, in Switzerland. In some countries, it developed only well after buildings with wood, brick, or concrete walls were erected with a stage for the actors and with or without seats for an audience. Parallel to the development of the stage and its possibilities, the education of an actor or actress became more and more sophisticated and even entered the curricula of universities and academies. You can see that also the theater education has adapted and developed itself. But what about the essence of theater as an art form? Is theater only there? Is theater only theater because it's live? Can theater be theater if there is no audience? Is theater real theater if it does not follow the principles set by the ancient Greek authors? Or is it not theater if it's not being created along the principles set by Grotowski, Stanislavski, Bruch, Shakespeare, or Brecht? Moreover, can you call a kabuki or no play theater? What about theatrical actions shown on the streets of Dhaka in Bangladesh by people who have been educated by their parents and friends and never heard the names of these remarkable theater educators? What about people in Samoa who are using theatrical and dance movements to link themselves with their gods? Maybe there is a common ground that we could define as the essence of someone who is acting. If she or he is in dialogue with other actresses and actors, if she or he is in good communication with the audience, maybe this could be called theater. If someone is able to play a role well, then he or she is a real actor doing real theater, maybe. It's possible that each of you has experienced something in your life that created interest or passion for theater that you are following since. Maybe you have experienced a pleasure moment or a moment of high interest during a theatrical performance that since then you would like to experience again. But there must be something with theater that is attractive. It may be a different immaterial aspect for each of us. Some may call it the energy that is created between the actor and the audience. Some may call it the spiritual fire that has been ignited in a member of the audience. But however we call this, there is definitely an essence in theater. Now that is not yet telling us what the role of theater is. In looking at the world we are living today, a world of uncertainties, it is essential to reflect on the role of theater for today and for the future. I guess that most of us were afraid when we were told we could be infected and even die due to a new virus. I think most of us were and are not able to travel, not able to shake hands or hug, or must keep a distance. I guess that all of those who organize conferences or festivals did not like to be blocked to do their job. Fear or even panic is not a good state for a person. It introverts, and what is worse, a person can be influenced by others more easily. Fear, according to Hannah Arendt and Walter Benjamin, was used before and during World War II to make people to become obedient. Does this affect our lives too? Well, we can observe these days that fear is misused for power reasons, but we should also be aware of a bad side effect of fear. It moves over to create fear of the foreigner, the migrant, the other nation, and through this it is nourishing nationalistic feelings or even racism. There is nothing wrong with loving one's community or country, but it should not exclude the rest of the world. For me, and maybe for some of you, the good theater venues and festivals were an eye-opener, as the international performance showed us that theater has no borders. The venues and festivals introduced theater troupes from other cultures and countries to the audience. They, for instance, showed that African performers have their own theatrical tradition, that the Mexican performance is different than the Russian, that the actors of the Chinese opera are speaking by using a different intonation. And when listening to interviews after the shows with exotic actresses and actors, singers and dancers, the person in the audience started to understand that even if they are foreigners, they are having similar emotions and similar values. They are all human beings. Theater was and is an excellent platform for internationalism. The goal to achieve mutual understanding and peace that UNESCO, the founder of the International Theatre Institute, ITI, was proclaiming in 1948 was true then, and it is true today. They conceived internationalism as a conviction that countries and people should work with each other, help each other, and be friendly with each other. This means no hegemony, no colonialism, no attitude of superiority, just respect for each other, for own and for other cultural expressions. This was one of the roles of theater in the past, and it should continue to play this role. For sure, theater has other roles, but building up mutual understanding between people of different cultures and countries of the world is essential today. Should this end with the digitalization of international collaboration? I hope not. I think theater is very powerful as an art form. It uses dialogue. It is a complex and intense form of communication used by people who are outstanding communicators. Theatre has adapted itself to the surroundings and conditions of the ages. Should we drop theatre as it was and how it was developed for a stage inside or outside of a venue? Should we all just look at performances on our phone or computer screens? Should we cancel all planned festivals and just watch performances online? The answers are no. Should we drop or not use digitalization? Again, no. Having watched a lot of digital version of plays in the last 6 months, I have to say it was somewhat interesting, but after a short while, I found it hard for me to concentrate. What I have seen on the screen lately reminded me of what Ariane Myushkin was doing when I visited her at the Théâtre du Soleil. It was a day after World Theatre Day event at UNESCO, where she read her message. I greeted her in her own venue. She had a little film camera in her hand. She told that she is, as usual, making a movie of her current performance, which was about to have its last presentation, Le Dernier Caravansérail, the last caravan stop. She explained that she has to find out how she is putting her theatrical creation into another medium, a movie. And she underlined that the medium of cinema needs a distinctively different approach than theater. And if you watch her videos that she did, you can see what she meant. Applied to the situation we are in at the moment, we have to learn how to find out where, how, and when it makes sense to make good use of the products of digitalization. Just to stream a play may not give the intended result. We need to find how we can use digitalization in order to giving added value to theater, when it is strengthening the message. When does it surprise the audience in an appropriate way? These and other related questions need to be explored. It also means that there needs to be a lot of experimentation, finding out what works for theater and what not. Being creative to find good solutions. Be courageous and find forms for theater the audience likes to watch in a digital form. But for how to go about this, well, there are theater and digital experts that hopefully surprise us in the near future. Moreover, there are theater experts present here at this conference whose reflections and viewpoints will bring further light into the matter. I hope you share my high interest in their approach. I want to end my words by thanking the Baltic House for the excellent collaboration with ITI and expressing my gratitude for giving me the floor now. I wish to everybody good health and the ability to watch local and international productions inside the venue, outside of a venue, or in a creative, digitalized form on a screen.
Thank you so much, Tobias.
Вы так много путешествуете.
Of theater, and my question is, do you have any strong impressions of the online performances that you could somehow compare with the offline performances? Or do you keep these impressions, offline and online, in two different spaces of theater? Can you compare offline and online in terms of strong impressions as the audience?
If you ask me,
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I can see what I experienced in the festival, the ITI UNESCO Network for Higher Education did, and then we have seen some. We have also, it was all streaming, but there was one performance that was done by young people in Spain that touched me extremely strong, because it really dealt with how you can do theater outside, how you can do theater at your home. And it was really a very strong communication. When I look at the performance that is just the camera, one set, and I look and maybe it goes a little bit nearer and a little bit further away, the energy is not really touching me. That's my experience. But those young students, they did a good job. They really did a good job.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks again for your speech. And we go on. Our next speaker is Ambassador Leon Faber, who is Deputy Executive Director of Asia Europe Foundation from Singapore. With the speech, Asia Europe Cultural Cooperation in the New Normal, what we learned this year and the way ahead. Please.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Okay, thank you very much for having me tonight. I greet you from Singapore, where the Asia Europe Foundation is based. And I would also like to greet everyone and for this, and especially also thank the Baltic House for this initiative, which I think is very, very useful, especially in these times. So for those of you who may not know us, we facilitate people-to-people exchanges among 51 countries in Asia and Europe, including Russia. In the past 23 years, we have brought together more than 40,000 professionals and students from 2 continents to exchange ideas and experiences. Culture has, of course, always been a priority for us. And ASEF has been in the business of funding and facilitating multilateral cultural cooperation since 1997. And our vast constituency spans from Scandinavia to Russia and down to the southeast of Asia and all the way to New Zealand and in the Pacific. What might be of interest to you to know is that our work is publicly funded by 51 countries, including Russia, as well as the EU and ASEAN countries that brings together 10 Southeast Asian countries, plus its secretariat. Together, these 53 partners make up the Asia-Europe meeting, an ASEM informal political dialogue process that set up the Asia-Europe Foundation. In the area of culture, we work across all artistic disciplines, including theater. We disseminate resources for artists, set up masterclasses and training workshops, offer travel grants, and commission new writing on the arts. I would like to highlight that collaboration is at the heart of our work. Our mission is not merely to support artists to create by themselves, it is in fact for artists from Asia and Europe to create together. Our experience, therefore, lies in curating where and how artists and cultural professionals gather. So you can well imagine that our traditional business model, which was dominated by face-to-face encounters, gathering artists, has been severely disrupted. I am sure that theater folks well recognize this particular conundrum we are facing, because like our own work, theater is unique in that at its very core, it is collaborative and it involves the magic of live encounters. This COVID-created conundrum led us at ASEF to deliberate over the course of this year on how we could keep Asia and Europe cultural collaborations going on despite the overwhelming odds. So today, I would like to share with you a little of what we learned this year in the context of the COVID and how we are adapting to the new normal. We learned very early on in the lockdown that theater was among the worst hit sectors across Asia and Europe, as the heartbreaking decision was made to stop production and let the curtains drop. Even where the arts went digital, as many genres have done with great success, including theater, we realized the urgent need to compensate cultural professionals for creating and sharing their work online. Particularly, the vast armies of freelancers, cast, creatives, production, technical teams who make up the bulk of the theater community. If Shakespeare's Globe Theatre had to call for urgent funding to avoid insolvency, we could very well imagine the uncertainty facing smaller theaters and the independent artists who make it all happen. We also realized that COVID is likely to exacerbate existing challenges, including that of unequal collaborations. The big questions with collaborations has always been, who do you collaborate with and on what terms? Inequalities persist even on a good day. Very often, visibility, maybe rather than ability, determines who gets the chance to become a collaborator on a production. So we asked ourselves how to reach out beyond the usual suspects to support emerging and more vulnerable professionals at this uncertain time. With digitization of international collaboration, we became even more acutely aware of this equity problem. How, for example, do we make sure that a non-English speaking freelancer from a small city in the periphery has an equal chance to access a digital opportunity as an English-speaking full-time staff of a major theater company that is very well aware of the grants and the schemes that are being offered? How to make sure both benefit and develop their full potential, not one at the cost of the other. On the other hand, I must add that we were also deeply encouraged by positive side effects of going digital. Our living rooms have become theaters, so we had the unimaginable opportunity to do two things of going digital. First, we could now extend our seating capacity to well beyond that of a regular theater building. And secondly, we could bring completely new audiences to theater. For instance, the UK Arts Council report From Live to Digital confirms that streaming does indeed appear to attract younger, less wealthy, and more ethnically diverse members of the population. So we sat down at ASEF with our culture team to think about how we should adapt our projects and methods to the new normal. And two fundamental principles for our future work emerged. We agreed that we would strive to create equal opportunities for everyone working in the arts in the new normal, and in the best way we could within our means, of course. We did not want COVID to deepen the imbalances that already exist and which at ASEF have worked for over 2 decades. We also reaffirmed the need to ensure ethical work practices in the arts, particularly in these difficult times. Creators should always be paid when they share their creations for the public to enjoy, even if it is done virtually. In line with these ideas, we are now piloting and testing virtual artist residencies, where artists are paid to take time to meet and collaborate with their peers from other countries. For these pilot programs, we also decided to give priority to young, emerging artists in the early stages of their career, namely those who are the worst affected by COVID. Outside of our own projects and events, we continue to compile and publish information about all sorts of grants and funds now available to artists. This is done through our arts website, culture360asef.org. I would really encourage all of you to please go and have a look at and use these resources. In the coming weeks, we will be opening a call for writers to create new content on Culture 360 Arts website. We would welcome applications from those of you watching today and who write about theater. It is our aim to commission and publish new knowledge on the arts by giving voice to those who are not in the mainstream. So please keep an eye on our social media, both that of ASEF, but also Culture 360. And early next year, we hope to offer co-creation micro-grants for artists and arts managers from Asia and Europe to create joint new works or text and showcase them to the world using social media as our gallery. Our mobility-first former travel grants are likely to transform into collaboration grants in 2021 and seed new and unusual connections across the 51 countries we work in. Think of this as an opportunity to travel virtually to countries on your bucket list and co-create with your peers. We would be delighted to receive out-of-the-box proposals from the theatre community. We are particularly interested in supporting fresh talent, especially from countries and regions that are, unfortunately, still very underrepresented in Asia and Europe cultural cooperation. We also strongly encourage freelancers to apply, and those living in and working in towns, villages, and spaces outside the big cultural centers. We are also keen to explore mini pieces of theater created for audiences who have never entered a physical theater or seen live performances even before. Another opportunity for our Asian and European young cultural professionals and youth across all sectors is the ASEF Young Leaders Summit, the official youth platform of the Asia-Europe meeting, where they will be able to meet the heads of states from these 51 countries. The fourth edition of the ASEF Young Leaders Summit will be part of the next Asian Summit that will take place next year in Cambodia. It will focus on youth leadership for sustainable development in the post-COVID-19 world and will be a hybrid project taking place virtually in Cambodia and in Singapore, as well as across all ASEAN countries. Watch out for the open call for applications, which will be launched in the first quarter of 2021. And we are looking for young and creative change makers and community leaders between 18 and 35 years. Yet another youth opportunity is the 23rd ASEF Summer University on ASEM Cities of the Future, Developing Livable Habitats, which will take place also in 2021 in partnership with cities and local governments in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. This is an experiential learning journey for students and young professionals to develop innovative solutions to societal challenges. Watch out also for this open call. The idea, as you surely understand, is to create more opportunities, greater agency for artists, and more equitable long-term relationships between Asia and Europe, while also making the arts more collaborative. So watch out for our Mobility First grants in early next year. Please do also write us at culture@asef.org if you have ideas or would like to know more about us. We would love to hear from you on what we could do to deepen Asia-Europe virtual cultural cooperation in the new normal, and also how we could strengthen ASEF's relationship with the vibrant, vast Russian arts community. So I really thank you for having me today, and I wish you all happiness and, of course, great success with this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Faber, for presenting us some aspects of the Asia-Europe Foundation. I'm sure you have lots of things to add, and we will have, I'm sure you'll receive the big feedback of our audience because the interest towards your direction of work is great, is indeed great. Thank you so much, and we move on to the next speaker, who is Professor Christopher Balm, the chair in theatre studies at the University of Munich, Germany, with the paper Theatre, Corona and the Ambivalence of Digitalization, Future Scenarios.
Thank you very much. I have a question to the organizers. Can I use screen sharing? Will this work, or would you prefer not to?
Yes, indeed. Please do it.
Okay, I'll try it. It might make it easier to follow my talk if I can show you some notes, yeah?
Absolutely.
So, you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Can you see it now?
No. What?
I'll try again. Do you see it now?
Yes,
No.
I can see it.
Yes, we can.
I see it. I see it. Yeah.
All right.
You see it?
Now
Yep.
we see it. Yes, thank you.
I see it. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start. Yeah, so thank you very much to the organizers for this invitation. It's great to see so many colleagues and from around the world, and that we can all gather here together and with such a very small carbon footprint. Very encouraging. So I'm going to talk about theatre in crisis. I've been working on this question for the last 3 years or so in a research project, and my colleagues from abroad have always asked me, why are you talking about theatre in crisis in Germany? I mean, German theatre is the best funded theatre system in the world. You can't be in crisis. And then, of course, along came Corona, and they said to me, you must be happy now, you have a real crisis. So we do indeed have a real crisis. So I want to talk a little bit about crisis as a concept. And when I was in China last year, my colleagues explained to me that the Chinese word for crisis is wei ji. Wei meaning danger and ji meaning a chance or opportunity. So, so if you look at the word, it means a crisis could be a kind of dangerous opportunity. And this is what I want to talk about today. Now, of course, the European concept of crisis is somewhat different, coming from the Greek, which basically means the turning point of an illness. And of course, this is immediate connection with the Corona epidemic. And so I wanted to sort of talk about these kind of two different understandings of what a crisis is or might be. Now, historically speaking, or in terms of the concept itself, in Western thinking, a crisis is a kind of a moment of dramatic intensification. So there's also has a theatrical component to it. It's a kind of peripeteia where things can go in one direction or the other. And the concept that we've been working with in our project has been strongly influenced by the German historian Koselleck, who talks about crisis in terms of a kind of a productive way to think about the future. And he even uses the term, he says, crises are problems crying out for solution, which go unsolved. The historical future is inherent in the crisis. And I think this is where we are today. We're looking forward, but we're also looking back. And I think this is what the Corona crisis is, in a sense, forcing us to do, to think about the theatre itself in these terms, before and after. But of course, it really is a crisis. If you look at, this is just some headlines, you can find these headlines everywhere. Particularly the commercial theatre is not even thinking about reopening until the middle of next year, because it just cannot afford to do it. German theatres are starting to reopen, but they're reopening with very reduced numbers of people. They might have 200, at the most 200 people in 1,000 seated, a theatre seating 1,000 people. Now, in terms of institutional theory, which is what I kind of work with, the Corona crisis is definitely a case of an exogenous shock. An exogenous shock means a type of crisis which comes from outside. It could be a change in the law or regulations which forces then institutions to do things in a different way. And of course, so the pandemic itself is an exogenous shock of quite exceptional, quite an exceptional degree, quite exceptional dimensions. So it's of a completely different order. And I think, as in any crisis, of course, some players are better off, are better positioned to profit from the change. That's normally the case, but suddenly, in this case, we have a situation where the whole game has stopped. Yeah, the whole game of performing live theatre has come to an abrupt stop, and we are now starting to start the game up again, but under very, very difficult conditions. And already you see, say on the second, the reference to the Old Vic. The Old Vic is going to continue its digital offerings, and we've already started to talk about the whole question of digitization as perhaps being one of the opportunities that are going to emerge from the crisis, but it might also be one of the dangers that is going to emerge from the crisis. So we have a very ambivalent, seems to me an ambivalent attitude to the whole question of digitization. So I want to now go through some possible scenarios. Dimitri's already started talking about them, and I think this has, what he said in his opening remarks, has a lot of resonances with what I've been thinking about too. So let's just go through them in a very, very brief fashion, because I don't have much time. So according to the theory of path dependency, one possible scenario is that as soon as the crisis is over, the systems will be restarted without any profound change. This is what path dependency means. It means you're set on a course, and it's very, very difficult to change this course. So that's one possibility. Yeah, we're all just waiting to go back to the status quo. A second one is that there's going to be a significant decline in theatrical activity. Yeah? Being, in a sense, deprived of theatre for so long is going to make people, in a sense, change their habits, perhaps, and stay at home and watch Netflix or whatever else you want to consume. So this might be. So this is the other possibility. This means that the already existing structural problems will be already intensified and accelerated. So what's definitely already happened is, and this has already been mentioned, it's the independent theatre workers have been extremely hard hit. And some say here in Germany that they may never recover. Then another possible scenario is that the high-risk groups, who in Germany at least are a very high proportion of the audience, they actually will avoid the theatre, yeah, because they are at risk of infection. And so, in a sense, the big risk here is that the group that is the strongest supporter of the theatre, both demographically and in terms of money, is actually going to stay away, yeah, until it's absolutely, in a sense, safe to go back into the water. The other side of this, again, this is danger and opportunity. The opportunity side of this would be that the theatres may then adjust and pivot to youth, that they may, in fact, completely rearrange their offerings and try and focus on this young demographic, the people who are perhaps less exposed to risk and who are much more willing to then sort of go into theatres and become part of this theatrical community again, and saying we're not worried about infection. Another theory would suggest that there's going to be a strong emphasis on the mainstream, because theatres have been so affected economically so badly, so strongly, that they're going to actually go back and try and reconsolidate and not experiment. This is one of the possible things that may happen, a kind of return to the essentials with this and with little appetite for experimentation. Another interesting scenario is the question of public funding. It's very clear that those theatre systems which have a strong amount of public funding are the ones that have been best positioned to weather the crisis. So as we're seeing this in Germany, the publicly funded theatres are already restarting their activities. Most of their employees are on some kind of longer-term contract, whereas those theatre systems, and I'm thinking here particularly the UK, but this applies, of course, to the United States and many other countries, which have a very low degree of public funding and a very high reliance on box office, they are now seeing that this system is pretty dysfunctional under these conditions. And so a possible thing, there may be a rethinking of the importance of public funding for the theatre as a long-term effect. So let's keep going. And this will then, of course, lead to a transnational comparison of systems, that there'll be a lot more, in a sense, interest in looking across the border and seeing what's happening next door. Just as we keep comparing all the infection rates, we may start to compare the different systems and see how well they fare or how badly they fared. And this will then lead, I think, to a kind of renewed interest or stronger interest in formats and spatial concepts that have become developed in the Corona period, and they may have a long-lasting effect and on such factors as the design of performance schedules. Yeah, why do we only perform once a night, once a day? Perhaps we can rethink our performance schedules, as I'm already seeing here in Munich, where people are performing shorter performances, but say twice a day, because we can only let in so few people. So this may be one of the longer-term effects on formats and schedules. Of course, the combination of digital and live media, what we're seeing, what we've already been talking about, this, of course, is going to be one of the big, I think, long-term effects and long-term, in a sense, reforms that may actually come out of the Corona crisis. And a departure from traditional venues in response to social distancing. There may be a stronger move to try and leave the buildings, to try and perform outside and not just be stuck in the black box all the time. Of course, weather permitting, this all depends, of course, on the climatic conditions. And last but not least, we're going to be looking at theatre as an archive. And we've already mentioned this. It's fascinating to observe how theatres have suddenly become turned into archives. Theatres are suddenly making available all these resources, these digital resources that they've had and they've never shown for so-called copyright reasons, and suddenly overnight these copyright problems disappeared. Yeah, they're suddenly no longer a problem. And so so instead of having this very traditional distinction between theatres on the one hand and theatre museums on the other, we've had a very interesting blending of these two functions. And this may indeed be a very interesting long-term effect of the corona crisis. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. I have other things to say, but I think I've done my 10 minutes. So I think we'll just can stop and give the word back to the organizers.
Great, thank you so much, Christopher, for most inspiring talk and very, deep remarks. And can I just ask a very fast question? To your mind, which country, which culture is now leading in consciously building the new schemes of getting out of the crisis in theatre?
In theatre, I think it's really literally too early to say. I mean, I'm only really observing what I'm seeing here in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, but we've already seen a very determined effort to try and get back into the theatres, at least in a partial sense. So we saw that at the Salzburg Festival. The theatres in Munich have now reopened, but as I said, under very, very restricted conditions. It's almost impossible for me to get a ticket because there are so few tickets on sale. But in a sense, the show is going on again. So I think, and of course, I'm a great supporter of the public funding of German theatre, but of course, it's not just German theatre that gets public funding. I really do think there's going to be a major rethink in terms of the relationship between public funding and sort of the commercial box office. I think that's already underway.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks again for your speech. And we go on to the Russian speakers now. Nika Parkhomovskaya is our next speaker, who is a theatre expert, curator, and producer. With the paper Theatre Dead and Alive, what did online give us, and what did it take from us?
Ника – специалист по театру, куратор и продюсер, театральный эксперт.
Спасибо, меня слышно?
Да, спасибо.
Can you? Yes. Okay, I will start, and I hope for a good simultaneous translation. If I need to slow down, let me know. We would like to warn you right at the beginning to speak slower. Okay, I'll try to speak slower and fit the 10-minute agenda. So what I would like to add is going to continue the speech of Christopher Palmer, and I would like to speak about the dichotomy which has already existed here, which has been created in a broad meaning. So this is a difference between the alive and the dead, and what the quarantine took from us and what it gave us. So I think that the quarantine showed the crises that existed before. Corona is not our enemy. This is what I think. The corona is something it is not something that happens spontaneously and unexpectedly. Да. Just maybe for those, it doesn't exist for those who are listening to us in Zoom. Надо переключать здесь язык. А что? Надо переключать?
Все, успеваем, кажется.
Сейчас я говорю. Я говорю на английском, да. Окей. Да, работает, все нормально. Да. Yes. Okay. No. Everybody hears. No, everybody hears you very well. You can continue speaking Russian language. It's okay if she speaks. It's okay if she speaks Russian. Зачем ей по-английски-то говорить? Хорошо, давайте перейдем на русский язык. Я хотела сказать...
А можно меня тогда не переводить на русский? Простите. Или мне просто выключить?
Диман, как вам удобнее? Если хотите, мы можем продолжать.
So I'm going to speak English so everybody understands. Okay. So Corona didn't cause anything. It just showed and some things which existed before. It made it or them obvious. And now I want to talk about life and death theater and what Corona took from us and what it gave to us. And first thing is the idea of the theater, its method. I think that with social distance, the distance between performers and the text became bigger or smaller. I think that the distance between different performers on one stage became different to what it used to be. And I think that the distance between performance and the audience changed a lot. And I mean that, for instance, in Russia, we really have a lot of performances which now are dedicated to one or two spectators, which require very close contact, not only site-specific or immersive shows, even more conventional and regular ones. And at the same time, there are more performances which are based on classic texts, like Greek tragedies, and which reflect on events which happened very, very long time ago, or are telling us about some characters who never existed. So the difference in this distance is very big right now, and there is nothing average. There is no way to be in between. And I think that theater is going to be even more polarized in recent future. And I don't know about Asian theater or American theater, but I can see this in Russian theater and also in Western European theater. The next thing I wanted to reflect on is the mechanics of the theater. And I think that before Corona, it was supposed to be more digital and be more media keen than it is now. What I mean, it's very weird to say that when we are now all on Zoom, speaking to each other, that digital aspect is not so important anymore. But I really mean that I think that to be contemporary, to be present, to be here and now, you don't need devices and gadgets anymore. Theater can be very, very today based without any technical equipment, something special. And it's very interesting to observe how it happens now, at least in Russia, in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, with small independent companies who either make Zoom performances and are very digitalized, or don't use any modern, equipment at all, and prefer to talk in person to their spectators. And I think that theater understood that to be contemporary and to be very political, it doesn't need to use all these media and to be expensive. It's also a question of money, of course. Like previous speaker mentioned, this public funding question, about theater in Germany. In Russia, it's mostly supported by the government, And due to the recent events and to the current situation, theater will be not affordable. And I think that it's going to be much, much cheaper in recent future, and especially like in 5 or 10 years. And my last topic is the spectators and the audience. I think the most important things are happening now in spectators' attitude. We are also fed up and tired of Zoom. We are online all the time. As previous speakers mentioned, we don't have any private life anymore, and our life is a little bit like theater, stage, and venue. So I think that the spectator is going to be more choosy, and he or she will react much more quicker. And I've seen that in real life. 2 days ago in Moscow, I've seen how people left the performance they didn't like. And I'm sure they wouldn't ever do that, or they wouldn't do that a year ago. But it happens only because they're very tired of being unspoken, being mute. And they have a wish to express themselves. They have a wish to react immediately, and they have a wish to have their cameras on, if you understand what I mean. Because in Zoom, we can do like this, and then come back, and we can disappear. And theater is something which requires our attention and our presence, because theater isn't possible at all without spectators and without this contact. And I think that this contact and the nature of this contact is going to be changed. But anyway, it's too early to, value and to give grades to what's happening. So I think it's a very good time to observe and to reflect and to think, and maybe not to hurry with our conclusions. So I'm not making any summary, and I'm not coming to any conclusion as well. I'm just trying to fixate what's happening around me and inside as well. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thanks to you.
Sorry with this inconvenience. I wasn't supposed to speak English, so sorry for my English.
You've done it excellently. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And, we're slightly behind the schedule, and that's why I'm making a note for the future for our discussion, because I know it's a wonderful topic that you are reflecting on, the new sincerity of the spectator, which we are going to speak, if the time allows, in the future, in the discussion, Nika. So please keep it in mind. Slightly later, we're going to talk about this. And our next speaker is Philippe Voullard. If you are within the time limits allotted, that will be very much appreciated. Okay, great. Yes, can I announce your speech? Right, yes, please. This is Philippe Voullard, director of Net Festival and Access Point Festival in Russia, international festivals. And the paper is Web as a Venue. Is there a way to celebrate performing arts online? Please.
I'm going to talk Russian a little bit and then English a little bit, just for my convenience, if you permit. To start with, I would like to say that we cannot say that the Point of Access festival is something really theatrical, because every time I say something in support of online, they tell me that's because this is what you do. No, this is not true. Many of us have started and have been taught to be in the actual theater when internet did not exist at all. So for us, it is as much of as a prize as for everybody else. So what we managed to do this summer and this spring with our Point of Access Festival, it was as much of an experiment for us as for our audience and spectators. And I think it was as much of a challenge for us as for the participants of the festival and the actors and actresses who work with us. I would like to do a small coming out. When I have some free time, I play computer games, and during the day I have lots of interaction with actual people, with real flesh and blood people. So at home I switch on my laptop and I play computer games. I do not want to be bothered at all. I've heard a lot from people who do theater that in the world of people who love this, who love the theater, who love computer games, there is nothing human. But I can assure you this is not true, and I will explain why I'm saying this. The world of computer games is absolutely different from what you think. There are computer games which offer you a creative environment where you exist alongside with other players, and using the net technologies you can coexist according to certain rules inside a certain digital environment. And I don't actually understand how this is different from what I do in my immersive theater, for the only tiny difference that at the theater I have actually to stand up from my sofa and get out of my house. So that is probably the only effective difference in what the two types of activity offer. I can come up with a quote from my colleagues at Video Lausanne Theatre in Switzerland when we discussed cooperation and a kind of online product to be created together in May. They work with lots of artists, and we do as well, and they say that thanks to lockdown, nature actually told us that traveling is evil. The traveling the way we traveled is not just. And I can tell you that at the beginning of February I had a little business trip where in 4 days, I managed to visit Narva in Estonia, Copenhagen, Bergen in Norway, Oslo, and then once again Copenhagen, Riga, and Moscow. And this is not correct. You cannot travel that much in 4 days. We have actually to confront the aims and the benefits of the travel with the harm this does to nature. So this introversive trend, introverting trend that is being imposed us in our daily life is actually very good. Before doing anything, you have to think twice whether it is worth the energy and resources you're going to use up. This is quite an important thing. And now let's get back to the theater. When we talk about digital theater and analog theater, I'm going to say once again, as a person who puts lots of effort in working with theater immersion, the only difference I see between the two, between digital and analog theater, is whether you have to get out of your house or not. Otherwise, I believe that this is more or less the same thing, the same environments. And then if we speak about people born after 2005, people who do not know the life before Web 2.0, for them it is different. It is not comparable. You know, the jokes about teenagers who come up to pictures in the museum and try to zoom into them to see what is behind the frame. All this applies to a certain generation. There is this existence together with the digital reality is not our new tomorrow, it is our new yesterday. It exists already and there is no way we can circumvent it. And I would like to share one more interesting idea. It's something that I come back to more and more often in the past 6 months. The digital possibilities offered to the theatre in 2020, well, actually before 2020, but there were certain reasons because of which we did not exploit those technologies or were not interested in this. You know, those digital opportunities will impact the development of the theatre, and as much as electricity once affected the theatre when the first electric lamps appeared in the audience halls. You know, since then, electricity has become essential, and so will digital technologies. We have one play in Access Point at our festival, and it's one of the, you know, most impressive works that has been presented in this unusual digital season. So in this play, in the preparation, there was a person who discussed with the director the way the play had to be structured, how the audience could interact with the digital platform and who had which role, and that was a very important component of the impression the play produces on the audience. We couldn't even come up with a name for this person, for his role, and the director suggested calling him a play architect. So the architect of the play, and this is just one of the discoveries that we're going to make in the future due to the collision of the online and the offline theatre. And so there is a kind of a dialogue, a kind of duplicity between wanting to return to our inner selves and getting out and, you know, subjecting ourselves to danger.
No. Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. We go on. I just keep some points for the future discussions, you know, because some processes and thoughts are going on. Okay. I'm happy to invite Professor Ricardo Abad from Philippines, who is the president of the Asia Pacific Bond of Theatre Schools, with the paper "The Pandemic and the Possibility of a Digital Global Solidarity." Please, Ricardo, go on. The virtual floor.
Thank you very much. Greetings from far away the Philippines. It's now about 8:30 in the evening here, and I'm looking forward to dinner after this session. Over the past weeks, I've been watching a webinar series, organized by BPAM, the Bangkok International Market for Performing Arts Market, something like this. And what they do is that these young artists talk with other young artists from other Asian nations. I remember Christopher Baum's point about pivot to youth. And here's a very interesting point about the pivoting to youth, where young artists talk to other artists. All right, so they talk to each week, they have a new country. It's Timor-Leste, Vietnam, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, and these things like this. There are three things I like about this series. One is that it seems they don't talk with the big countries like China, Japan, and India. They talk with the smaller countries, even including the Philippines, countries whose theater life is not so visible in the international radar. Okay, so it's very, very interesting that they may take seriously this notion of inclusion. All right, very much in line with what Tobias was talking about, openness and diversity and no hegemony and stuff like that. And the second thing I like is that the tone is not serious. It's very light. And the discussion is, they talk about serious things, important issues, but the tone of the young is more like building friendships, building networks. And to me, when I hear Leo talk about collaboration and cooperation, I was wondering if maybe one day we can talk more about how this is achieved. But it seems to me from this series that the first thing to do is be friends, know each other. And I think this is the first step that this Thai group, young people are doing. Let's know each other, what they're doing, and maybe next time they will collaborate for something else. The third thing that interests me about this meeting is that this meeting would not have taken place were it not for the pandemic. All right, the BPAM has an arts market annual festival every year. They have a festival every year, and of course it's canceled this year. And it's because it is canceled, it allowed, as somebody said, I think Christopher also said it, more opportunities. I think at the opening statement said that it opened opportunities for more digital or online interaction. So it's really a product of the times. And that's the point that I want to give out today. That digital theater, as we all know, is really the new normal. It's the normal we have now. And all of us are part of it. We share in the crisis that Christopher talks about. We share in the, and it has given us an opportunity, but my thesis, for a kind of digital global solidarity. Now, solidarity is simply more than just cooperation and collaboration. It's also acting with one purpose, with a certain common purpose and a common intention, all right? And I think the solidarity becomes important because we have shared in the crisis that Christopher talked about. We shared, all of us have shared the sufferings and the pain and the losses. My nephew died 3 weeks ago. Many things that we share, all right? And then we share also in the fact that the great awareness that to solve this problem, we have to act as one, all right? We have to cooperate. Nations have to cooperate. We have to provide data. We have to share vaccines. We have to share funds, many things like this. And so I think the theater must realize the same thing, that when we go after this, which I call the next normal, I think it should come from the principle that we have now and give the opportunity now to act with some greater solidarity, global solidarity in the theater, and the digital platforms enable us to make those things happen. Now, what we call for, I think, is a kind of a raising of consciousness. Many of us are engaged in like acts of collaboration and acts of cooperation, all right? But what we're talking about is that we should raise our consciousness to the point that we should think about our school, we should think about our region, we should think about our country, but over and beyond that, find space to include and think about the world, all right? That's partly the global consciousness. It's not eliminating what you do in your schools or your country or your association, but think of it in the bigger picture. I am working with Asia Pacific directors, but even in that sphere, I'm trying to get them to open up. And our participation with ITI enables that group to think not only Asian, but think world. All right, so how do I steer them to think global and act in solidarity, not as an Asian Pacific group that is trying to be politically visible in the theater scene, but not so much that as in partnership, how can we improve the world, how can we improve ourselves in cooperation with all the other groups. So it's not denying nation and self and school, but simply including that larger focus. Now, as I said, we are doing a lot of things already along this line, but I think what we should do in raising the consciousness to global solidarity is to tweak a few things. We can tweak a few things. For instance, we should think in terms of wider inclusion in all our associations, all right? We should think about enriching what I call horizontal relationships. Now, the BPAM series that I talked to you about is a good series. I like it very much, but it stresses vertical relationships. It's Thai talking to Brunei, Thai talking to Thailand, to Malaysia, Thai talking to the Philippines, Thai talking to Vietnam. Vietnam, Philippines, they do not talk, all right? Brunei and Myanmar, they don't talk. So in any format, I think what you should think about is not to stress vertical relationships, but horizontal ones. All right? Now that's the first thing I want to do. And then we should also think about nations whose digital platforms and online connections are not so strong. So we must find ways in which we can reach out to more people, even though their digital connections are not very strong. All right, this will ensure more diversity and inclusion. Now, the regional associations like My Asia Pacific Bureau, BOND, or ITI, or the European Theatre Union, are the ones that are what you call could be the leading agencies in fostering this notion of global solidarity. They should be at the forefront of this. And how do they do this? How can they put up the work on another, raising their levels? I think game theory tells us many things about how cooperation and collaboration can be achieved. One is that the payoffs for cooperation and working together are greater when the payoffs that will work, the cooperation will more likely occur when the payoffs to cooperation are greater. So we must find ways in which we can work together because the payoff is big. So we have to find out what payoff, what motivation will make people cooperate more, all right? Many times the barriers are distance, maybe money, maybe I cannot speak English, and things. How do we work it out so that the payoffs are great? Incentives, some learning skills, improved training, best for the students, and better. My experience is that, for instance, when the Australians and New Zealanders go and mix with the Malaysians and the Indonesians, the world opens up together. Very great incentive for the Australians and the New Zealanders to work with Asians because their mind blow when they see an Asian form. And that is a very great incentive for them to collaborate. So the Australians and the New Zealanders are among our active collaborators in the association. Okay. And the other game theory also tells us that we have to create what is called interdependencies among groups, not independencies. Okay, which means that people have to have the habit of working together, of finding ties that bind them together, rather than this. In festivals, for instance, I find that the festivals showcase school activity, which is very nice. It's good to know what the schools are doing. But it does not foster this kind of talking among schools, this time of doing projects among schools. One of my dream festivals for the Asia Pacific Bond, maybe in a year or two, no country will show a show by itself. Each country must show one in collaboration with another one, all right? And that's so that the countries must learn to deal and work with each other. Language, cultural differences, whatnot, they have to overcome this and come together. This format is becoming increasingly popular in APB. We see Australians and the Malaysians work together. We see Thailand and Hong Kong and Singapore working together. It's very, very fascinating. And everybody, and we hear complaints, but we also see the product is quite good. But you have to undergo those points. So that's the second thing about game theory. Create interdependencies. How can festivals create interdependencies? Now, I can network in a festival, but how can I be sure that those networking will last a long time, even after the festival? So again, we have to think about ways in which that is possible. The third game theory is that cooperation is best with smaller groups than large groups. I can imagine Tobias's problem trying to get together this large group of ITI member schools, getting them together. That's very, very difficult. Better if you work in small groups. That is why the UNITWIN, they group it into Asians and things, they group it together, finding smaller groups so there will be more cooperation. We should try to think of many other formats in which this is possible. But in other words, cooperation is greater when that happens. And maybe next time we don't divide it by regions. We divide it by purpose, by interest, by something else. We want to do something about the pandemic, or all countries who want to do it, they have a festival together, rather than dividing it by regions. That will force greater interdependencies and diverse kinds of holistic vertical relationships. Okay, beyond festivals, beyond shows, I think we have a very great opportunity for other formats, sharing. I can imagine teachers, Derek Goldman giving a lecture that will be broadcast to the different schools. All right, and very Christopher Baum giving a lecture, let's say, on intercultural theater, and master teachers like them who will go out and show and become, teachers of world theater, whose ideas can spread and influence people to think about theater in very unique ways. That's one. We can offer courses. I know ITI is a training institute, but we can also form a series of courses on acting, on theory, on spirituality in the theater, a smorgasbord of kind of courses that schools can offer and offer them online to anybody, any theater person in the world. All right? If they're Chinese, you put Chinese subtitles, you put whatever it is, or Spanish subtitles or Russian subtitles. The idea is to be open to the ideas of theater spreading out beyond festivals. Because unless the change happens, the festivals will be online, but again, opened up. We can even give diploma courses and we can things like this. All right? I have one request from one of my schools in the Philippines. Ricky, can you help me? I have so many majors in the theater in my school, but can you give me a lecture on how they can earn a job after theater? Okay? And they have many people in their theater majors in their school, because in the school, theater is seen as a source of change. They use theater to protest. All right? Every lunchtime, they protest something. All right? They practice their art in terms of protest theater. And so many students join the theater, not so much for the art, but for the opportunity to have political kind of efficacy. All right, that's it. Now, there are many ideas circulating now that helps us in the theater. There is, for instance, Derek Goldman's work shows how he builds solidarity from his work. The Shanghai Theater Academy has international connections all over the place. People interacting there. That's a great deal of work there also. The Singapore, LaSalle, they talk about planetary performances. Very interesting. And which talks about, again, a kind of a wider perspective of theater. And then you have the European Theater Lab, for instance, technology. Many possibilities there for people from different countries to interact and see how technology can be of help to them in this digital age. And really, the National Taiwan Institute of the Arts also has a kind of technology, art thing, connection, which are very, very open. Now that we talk about the Asia-Europe Foundation opportunities, which are also in that direction. So, and of course, the ITI has been doing a lot of this for a long time. So the point I want to make is that there are efforts and ideas circulating now that we can build on to create global solidarity. We just have to find the means and the ways in which this can be done. Okay, so I think we should make global solidarity a kind of our utopian vision of what to be as part of what the theater will do now and in the future, okay? Because as one of the scenarios is that what we learn in the pandemic is bound to influence what we are going to do in the future. It will not just be, I think, you just forget it. I think the impact will be much greater, at least for many years. It's not like the Japanese War. After a while, in the beginning, people hated the Japanese, at least in the Philippines. But after 20 years, the young people come and they've forgotten about it. All right? So the idea is that many times, I think with this pandemic, because it's so worldwide, the memories will remain. And let me close with a Philippine folktale called The Magnificent, the Miraculous Violin. All right? And, in this story, a young boy gives his last 2 coins to a beggar, and the beggar gives him a miraculous violin. And the beggar tells him, if you come into trouble, you face your challenges, just play the violin and the trouble will go away. So I think what our mission is to have something, the global solidarity, find that as our mantra, as to be our miraculous violin, as something we can play to sort of clear the theater and make theater more inclusive, as the vision of Tobias about no hegemony, more equality, more things like that, more discussion, more inclusion, and active working together. And that's my plea for this seminar. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you, Ricardo. Thanks for your energetic speech, very energetic as usual. And now, on this optimistic note, we announce a break. It was planned for 15 minutes, but I suggest we shorten it because we're slightly behind the schedule. We are going to continue our roundtable in 10 minutes. Okay? So now 10 minutes break. Thank you very much. We continue our roundtable today, and the next speaker is Philip Dietermeyer, who is the head of programs at European Cultural Foundation Netherlands, with the paper Designing Cross-Border Learning and Co-Creation Experiences in Corona Times. Some first insights and reflection. Please.
Yes, hello. Can you all hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Thank you very much. A paper would be a little bit too much for practical insights, but I have a few slides, which I also would like to start sharing with screen share as illustration. Can you see these slides?
Just give us a minute.
It always takes some time.
Right. Yes, it takes some time. And Günther says,
just give me a sign because I cannot see you now anymore when I'm screen share. So just let me know when you can see it.
Yes,
and I
sure,
can start.
Can can you try to share it again?
Could you please?
Yes.
And now, can you turn on full screen mode, please, Philip?
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Great.
Great. So that is solved. Then hello again, and thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Philip Dietermeyer. As I was already introduced, I'm the head of programs here in Amsterdam at the European Cultural Foundation. I thought I'd start with a few words also about the foundation, because I'm not a theater scholar myself. We work a lot with theaters and have many collaborations with theaters all over Europe and groups around the world, I would even say. But I'd like to start my short input with the image you see here in front of you, which is an artwork that was created a couple of years back by a Polish land art artist called Jaroslav Koziara. And you see on the left, you see Poland, on the right, you see Ukraine, and in the middle, you see the Schengen border, and that whole symbol of the fish crossing the EU border was actually created with plows by farmers with their tractors, who had every single time they had to make a move, they had to cross an EU border and basically leave the Schengen area and come back from the Schengen area. And the reason why I use this image very often is that it very much symbolizes what the European Cultural Foundation stands for, meaning transcending or going across borders with cultural and artistic contributions. And I thought it would also stand like a very nice symbol for our topic today, because it's also something very analog in terms of fields and nature and plows and craft. But you can only see it from the air if you have a technical instrument or device that can fly over it. Only then the artwork becomes complete. And I think as a reaction to the earlier contributions, we are very much convinced that it's not an formerly analog world that goes into a digital now, and it's not an either or, but it's a together. And these are experiences we have made in the past month also. But a few words about the foundation itself. So I should maybe also say we are not the European Union. We are a private lottery financed foundation that has a pan-European mission, probably the only cultural foundation that has a pan-European mission there is. We have been around for a very long time, since 1954. The founders of the European Union, Robert Schuman was our first president. So we have a lot to do with the idea of the European Union, but our founders had the idea that Europe could not only build on coal and gas and steel agreements, but it had to bring the minds and the people and their ideas together across borders. And that particularly would be a a cultural task which we have been working on for many decades now. I should also explicitly mention that we, of course, not only work inside the European Union countries, but our idea and our conception of Europe is very, very broad, and at least includes all the neighboring regions around the European Union, but in some programs even Europe's role in a global aspect. One of our historically main programs that speaks a lot for what we stand for and what we do is the Erasmus Students Exchange. Many of you, or most of you, will actually know, and I mention this because it stands very much for all the programs and all the support tools and all the values we try to realize in our ongoing programs. But as I mentioned, we also work a lot with theaters as such. It's maybe to come to our topic already for many years that we don't work necessarily with theater groups that need stages or classic 19th century theaters for their work, as some of my of the earlier speakers also already mentioned. We, for example, worked, as you see here, with Rimini Protocol and 100% Amsterdam, where theater goes a lot to kind of like the world, the people outside the theater spaces, or brings the world and the theater spaces back into, brings where people live back into the theater spaces. We have been working with small groups like Belarus Free Theater. This is from many years ago in the space they operated in, like in a living room in a house in the suburbs of Minsk. And one of our recent projects together with Milo Rau last year, the Nuovo Vangelo, which was a reenactment of Pasolini's famous film in Matera, which was also a European capital of culture. But as you see here, sitting around the corner, his cast came actually from the camps of the illegal fruit pickers in the south of Italy. So where basically again issues in social issues, justice issues in societies actually come into the theater space. I've put this as an example also because the film that came out of this as a documentary has just aired on, or just was presented at the Venice Film Festival. But all these examples I just introduced, of course, also show that this was last year when physical interaction and bringing people together was still possible, which is, of course, also brought our programming very much under pressure, and this physical interaction, which we very much built on, wasn't possible any longer. What we did, nevertheless, one of our flagship programs in the spirit of creating a culture of solidarity across Europe and transcending borders, going across borders. Culture of solidarity, by the way, was also the theme of a very large grant, very large grants program we had going on this year for actually looking into the effects of closing borders and crossing borders, and how cultural initiatives can do something to maintain solidarity among Europeans. And Tandem is one program that is around for long already, that brings exactly initiatives across such borders. That is usually working with physical placements in the locations where the Tandem partners work, which was, of course, due to travel restrictions and no physical encounters possible, very much limited this year. But we focused instead on moving co-creation of new productions, of new ideas, of new projects into the online space, into the digital space, with the idea, as I said at the beginning, not that it would replace the analog world, because as I mentioned, as the organization that has invented and co-created Erasmus together with the European Union, we could, of course, not say, now it's fine, people don't need to travel to make cultural experiences anymore as professionals, as citizens, because then as well, the Erasmus Students Exchange could happen online as well. And I think we all agree And everybody who studied abroad or spent time abroad knows that this is an impossibility. So we saw, okay, how can we kind of like basically move digital experiences for creation for the future when we can meet again and can collaborate again into digital space, and came up with all sorts of tools, new formats for co-creation of ideas, for designing project concepts. And I have to say that did actually work quite well. You see one example you see the title in the center, Culture Lab Europe, which was supposed to be a kind of like co-design, co-creation hub and event and multi-day seminar in Rijeka, which couldn't take place, but then we tried to move it online. And you see, we created a whole environment, which David called the Culture Lab Europe City, with many different tools like Miro, you see here on the slide, but also that was one of our learnings, like in real life as well. It was very much about the variation of tools also. So that worked with Zoom, what we do now, but in parallel, people worked on Miro, where you can put Post-its. There were things even, of course, that you could go to the virtual bar and have beers with people together, that you could move around from room to room. This was very much designed and built with people, as you can see, who have an idea about design, who create such experiences also in the analog world, and delivered, there were around 200 participants in this and delivered around 50 new project ideas, collaboration ideas, which we have even started to finance as a startup initiative, and that will grow further in the coming years, also when we can meet online again. Another example, what we did, and many others tried as well, is the format of a hackathon. I just show you this. This is the environment of Slack, another tool we used, which also had its advantages and disadvantages. This was much more for people who are like very used to digital environment, the digital working culture already. I was astonished because people were in this environment also for like 3-4 days, and really a lot of ideas and creative conceptions came out of that, because the threshold of engaging with new people is also very low. And one of our advantages we saw, of course, as European Cultural Foundation, what you experience here also at the conference, is that it's at the moment very, very easy to gather many people at no cost from very different places online for creating, for brainstorming, for designing something. For us, as I mentioned, it is very much online facilitation, online co-creation. And this is just another insight, just more visually as an illustration rather than in the details, which I can nevertheless share from our toolbox also with people who are interested in how actually you can use different design thinking, co-creational tools in an online environment, but never with the idea that everything just stays online, but that we will have a mix in the future after the pandemic, that we meet again, that we have this physical, tangible experiences in spaces again. But that, I think, and one of my the earlier speakers already mentioned, because one topic, of course, for an organization like us, which focuses, like also the Asia Europe Foundation and others, so much on the values of cross-border mobility and cultural mobility, is, of course, also, that was already on our radar before Corona, is the climate impact. And for that reason, I think we will not, and we can't, I believe, as credible cultural actors, let go of real people-to-people human interaction and physical experiences in the analog space. But among other, because of the climate crisis ahead of us, we will have to further work on the combination of digital tools and analog tools, with maybe a combination of digital tools for co-creation and more local, regional travel, longer stays. I also totally agree with what some of the previous speakers also said. It's far too early to draw conclusions now. I think this is the time of experimentation, of seeing how this analog-digital mix can look like. And indeed, it's exciting times in terms of, unfortunately, I believe also a lot of destruction ahead of us, but let's hope it's creative destruction, to quote one of my famous Austrian compatriots, Schumpeter. And with that, I'd like to close for the moment. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks a lot, Philip. It's a wonderful beginning of the section, which is more dedicated to specific projects and discussion of results. Can we just slightly change our schedule, because our colleague from the United States has to go offline very soon. Now, please, the floor is for Professor Derek Goldman from Washington, D.C., who is the chair of the Department of Performing Arts and director of the Theatre and Performance Studies program at Georgetown University. Please share your ideas on the theme models for theatrical collaborations and virtual exchange. Please, Derek, you go.
Thank you, Dimitri, and thanks for accommodating that. It's really wonderful to be with everybody. Already very inspired by colleagues' remarks. Can everybody hear me okay?
Wonderful.
Great. Yeah, I'll just take a few minutes and share. Wanted to really build on what a lot of these great colleagues have been saying about the potential and the hope in this otherwise dark and challenging moment for theatrical collaboration and virtual exchange. I think both in the professional and in the student context, I think we have many examples of where we see these experiments that have been happening successfully during the pandemic and how they offer ways, hope for deepening those as beyond the pandemic and for having, as my colleagues have said, a new normal or a next normal where we're better able to integrate the ways that we spend time in person and the ways that we spend time virtually. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I know some of you. I'm at Georgetown University, and I co-direct an initiative that I founded called the Laboratory for Global Performance and Politics. The mission of the lab is to harness the power of performance to humanize global politics. We develop new projects, we host a major festival, we have a Lab Fellows program with young artists from around the world, path-breaking artists working at this intersection of theater and social change, or theater and politics. Currently, our fellows cohort includes a wonderful Russian artist, Adam Mukina, along with artists from Cambodia, Vietnam, Zimbabwe, South Africa. But above all, as Ricardo was saying, what the lab's work is about is what so many of your work is about relationship building, about friendship building, about solidarity, about exchange. The work that I've been able to do with Tobias for many years and many other colleagues as part of International Theater Institute and the Network for Higher Education and Performing Arts, all of these are designed to be spaces for relationship building and for friendship building and for in a context where our political world is increasingly toxic and polarized, and where we have so much misunderstanding of one another. These are spaces where we can come together and see each other as human beings and form new understandings. And I think theater is especially good at that because of the human to human dimension. And this moment, that is especially needed. And so many of these projects are in that, are sort of in that spirit. And just in the interest of time, I thought I would share with you one particular project that feels very much in this spirit right now, that is a US-Russian collaboration. And in a couple of moments, I'm hoping Karina will be able to show the trailer, which is a 2-minute video of this project. But I thought I would tell you a little bit about it first. This is a project called Flash Acts. It's a partnership between our lab at Georgetown and some American partners, Arena Stage, which is a major professional theater here, and a wonderful organization called Forum for Cultural Engagement that does cultural diplomacy work, as well as the United States Embassy in Moscow, but also the Lyubimovka Young Playwrights Festival and the Center for Modern Drama in Ekaterinburg. And what the festival is, and it's now a free online festival available to folks. It just premiered last week. We commissioned 10 leading American playwrights and 10 leading Russian playwrights to take the theme of isolation, which of course we're all experiencing in different ways, personally, politically, and to write short plays for virtual productions done on Zoom, and then hired teams, directors, actors, and sort of Zoom design teams to produce these. So what now exists on the website are a total of 40 productions of 10 to 15 minute plays. And these really are visually very exciting, dynamic Zoom productions. They're not just us in our boxes or our squares. Of these plays, and part of what's all in translation. So you can watch the American version and see the Russian translation. You can watch the Russian version, and the versions are side by side. And one of the things that I think has proven most exciting about this is that often the versions are kind of what we say more than the sum of its parts. By seeing this new play and seeing what Russian artists, how they've approached it and how American artists have approached it, and being able to compare and combine, it's allowing audiences and artists to get to know each other's work aesthetically as well as politically, to say, oh, look at what Russian artists are doing, or this is how American artists work, as well as around issues. One of the things that I'm sure many of you have been following, and it's not only true in the United States, but we're having a very important reckoning here around long-held issues of racial and social justice in the United States. And that's manifesting in the theater community. And the vast majority of the artists and playwrights who are part of the American group are artists of color, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And it's been really exciting to have the same plays, to have the conversations about cultural translation of how issues that we're facing in the United States, how they manifest in Russia and vice versa. And you see that in the two versions of these productions. I'll just say a couple other things before we show the trailer that I think, to me, offer maybe a model in this Flash Acts, in this Flash Acts world. One is that this is a lot of students and young people have really embraced this festival. There are forums and panels, there are music salons, there are a lot of students who've been involved as artists, and the students have started creating their own exchanges. So our Georgetown students have been meeting with students from the School of the Moscow Art Theater and creating WhatsApp groups and talking about the work in the festival and building their own relationships. And that's part of what I think the promise of all of the work that my colleagues here are doing is that we can not only create products, but we can kind of seed and catalyze conversations and new relationships that can happen very profoundly in virtual spaces, and then that can lead to in-person collaborations on the other end of this. So I'm very conscious of the time. My great hope, I'm very energized by this gathering and this conversation because we come from all of our corners of the world. And we will be back in person again. That is the work we're all invested in and we're all committed to, but it won't be the same. It won't be the same as how we were together. And as my colleagues have all said very articulately, how we're learning to engage in these spaces will inform how deep and meaningful these relationships can be as we travel towards each other and as we sustain the relationships virtually when we can't travel. And when we're not traveling. So Karina, I'm hoping that you have the ability, I'd love to share this 2-minute trailer, and then this festival is free and online. You can watch it. There's quite a lot of material, 12 to 15 hours of content, and there's 40 productions. I think my Russian colleagues and students will recognize many of the Russian artists involved. They're leading Russian artists. My American colleagues would certainly recognize these are leading American artists. And that's the other cool thing is we're getting to know each other's artistic communities. So if the video is there, maybe we can play it. we have sound?
Yes, we do.
Thanks for sharing that. And the last thing I'll say before handing it over is just one of the things that you see little glimpses of many of the productions there. And as I say, you'll recognize many of the artists involved. It's all theater, it's not film. And what I mean by that is that these are playwrights working for the stage, and the way these were created was through theatrical rehearsal processes where stage managers were calling cues live, artists were together on Zoom. And I think that's one of the sort of hybrid models that we're creating, is thinking about ways to use technology, but still be working in the way that we as theater artists are accustomed to working, which is live. So anyway, thanks for the time, and thanks for having me, and sorry, and thanks for, I'm gonna be here till almost 10 o'clock, but I appreciate you being able to move me up because I have to go chair a department meeting.
Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you so much for the impressive presentation and for sharing your ideas with us. Thank you, thank you. So we go on, and now the next speaker is Günther Hasenkamp. Thank you for being with us in the Presidium. For your physical presence, which is very much appreciated. Yes. Günther Hasenkamp is director of Goethe Institute in St. Petersburg, and his speech is dedicated to the theme, Digital is Good for You, some experience with digital formats in cultural project work. Please, go on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and we always enjoy to be at the Baltijski Dom here in St. Petersburg. And I'd like to say also I'm enjoying very much to be part of this truly international conversation. Let me just check we get the technicalities right, because I would now need the green screen. And then I'm afraid I will have to turn my back on you, but purely for technical reasons, because I need to see that screen. So digital is good for you, or in other words, how can we continue with cultural exchange during a pandemic? I'm speaking here from the point of view of a local cultural institution, the mission of which is to get organized with cultural exchange. And early on this year, this is exactly the question we were asking ourselves. So how can we continue our conversation? I'm having 4 questions here and 4 answers, 3 of them very short and 1 coda. Next, please. There's on the next screen, the next please, we should see 3 of the questions. And here they are. So these are basically the questions from your paper. 1, have we changed? Yes. 2, will it ever be the same again? No. 3, how have we changed? Well, the answer is very simple. We are now doing things we never did before. And if you allow me, I will show you a few images as examples of what we've been doing. Next screen. Kulturcafé is the name of a video journal, which we invented rather quickly, already in March, April this year. And we did a first season of these videos in May and June. It was altogether 42, and we covered various areas of concern. You may see among those faces, some of you may or should be among these faces. And next screen, please. This is one example from a theater of what we included into the video journal. On the right-hand side, you see a photograph from a premiere which happened here in this very place a week ago, of a play called Veliki Pažar, The Big Fire. But on the left-hand side, you see something like a test version, which we did as an online live production within the framework of our video journal. Next, please. Before I'm showing the next slide, I need to tell you very briefly what a SHARK is. SHARK is a publication project of the Goethe Institute in Russia, which presents new theater text to a Russian-speaking audience. And as many as 5 books are out already. A 6th one is under collection. And next, please. So we used our video journal to do play readings from SHARK, and play readings which also included a discussion of the material. This was curated by Maria Slojeva and was called Teatr v Kuchni, so it's a theater from a kitchen point of view, and it was filmed during the lockdown. So that is why you see people practically in a kitchen in 3 different places doing this reading, making yourself looking at the text and the material. Next, please. This is a literary reading, but it's done online, and it's done in such a way that they almost shake hands, but almost, because left is Leipzig and right is St. Petersburg. We called it the Lit Beat on a split screen. 2 writers read and interact. And next, please. I can now actually see here how it was done, because it also included a walk through the city, depending on the text with subtitles and video footage and everything. Next, please. We did include into our video journal a presentation of what is usually referred to as a virtual art residency project. This one was done at Pushkinskaya Desert, which is well known in the city, but I will now rather not elaborate on what's the difference between a real and a virtual art residency. There are differences, but amazingly, it seems to be working out quite well. Next, please. Another format we are using, which is coming up in 2 weeks actually, is an online film festival. Now, it's trivial to talk about online film festivals because they happen everywhere, but I'd just like to make a point about the following. These online film festivals, and this idea was really brought home to us, reflect what we could call the dissolution of space. Usually you do a film festival in a city or in a cinema. You no longer do it in a cinema, and you no longer do it in a city. You do it all over Russia, so from Kaliningrad up to Vladivostok, and that's quite a new experience for us. Next, please. What we're also preparing at the moment is a podcast with the working title After Tomorrow, which will address topics like global change, the climate crisis, certain urban topics, etc. Next, please. Also upcoming is what we are currently referring to as a digital double concert. That's a musical format, but it draws very much on certain experience in theater, because how it works is we will, on 2 evenings, we will have a double concert in Berlin and in St. Petersburg with alternating live shows, which the audience in the other city then can see, and during certain phases you will have talks and improvisations and so on. Next, please. So this is the 4th question. What is our strategic assumption at this moment? As long as we cannot or not really do offline events, we will now test every single digital idea we can think of. Thereafter, we will most probably retain some of them, and we will integrate them into a new profile of our work. Digital is good for us. We will widen the existing array of formats and reach out to many more audiences. Next, please. So now the coda has got two parts, because this is just a statement I wanted to make when I got prepared for today. Corona certainly made us much more sensitive than we were. We've been really realizing, one, the importance of being together, or culture as a renewed community experience. I think we all remember these things which were so popular in April and May. The example is the New York City virtual choir, people joining online in order to produce a cultural event, in this case, a piece of music. Next, please. So this is my last slide. I believe that it is imperative to develop a culture of solidarity. And I can give one example from St. Petersburg. It's a project called Pomagi Vracham. Just briefly an explanation to those of you outside Russia. Pomagi Vracham means help the doctors. And what happened earlier on this year is that a number of actors read out documentary material, namely letters from doctors who worked in hospitals with COVID-19 patients. And thus, they tried to give these people a voice. I think there's also an example from Europe at the European Culture Foundation. There is, as far as I know, a funding program called the Culture of Solidarity. Philipp Dietermeyer could certainly talk about it. I'm very happy to online meet Philipp, because we first met offline, but that's years ago. Maybe he can later on give some more information about that. I believe that talking about the culture of solidarity, Russia is a good place to do that. We need not go back as far as Anton Pavlovich Chekhov and his travel to Sakhalin. But there are many examples in Russian cultural history of this. Next, please. So this is the end. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and for your attention. Merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation and for being so deep in the Russian culture. You know, so many things about it. Thank you. Thank you. So we go on. And our next speaker is Maria Kermanovskaya from Russia, who is the program manager at Pro Helvetia Moscow, with the talk Digital versus Offline, the experience of international projects during the pandemic.
Hello, yeah, hope everyone can hear me well.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So thank you very much, Dmitry. Thank you very much, the organizers of the conference. I'm very honored to be the part of this wonderful international team today. And the organizers asked me to share some practical tips of how an international organization can survive or survived during these pandemic times. So we'll start with a few words about what Prolet's mission is in Russia and how we realize our projects. And then I will try to give a few examples of how we manage to do our projects online and digital. And in the end, I will tell a couple of things about what we expect from this digitalization of our projects during the next year. So Prolet is a public foundation, and we are a branch based in Moscow. We're responsible to operate projects, exchange projects in the whole country, on the whole territory of Russia. Prolet's main mandate is to support contemporary Swiss arts and artists in Switzerland and abroad. And it's important to say that our work is very much based on long-term partnerships and collaborations. That means in our everyday work, we rely very much on the initiatives coming from our partners who always work as co-organizers or co-producers of our events. For example, in our Moscow office, we don't have a premises of our own, like a gallery or a venue where we can present our projects. Neither do we have a digital space, like Goethe Institute, for example, to present it in some things. So we very much rely on the infrastructure and some administrative resources that our partners have. And it's also important to know that apart from the tours, like of performing Swiss companies coming to Russia. Our performative program was usually very much dependent on specially tailored projects, which means some special formats that required the direct presence of the artists and of their physical presence at some locations. For example, like at workshops and training laboratories or site-specific projects or residencies. So when in March this whole pandemic thing started, we of course found ourselves in some kind of a vacuum. This is not because we, let's say, never did some digital projects before, but we, I must admit, we never did it to such an extent and at this intensity, with this intensity. So one of the first partners who lent a helping hand to us was the Point of Access Festival from St. Petersburg. We already heard the speech of Philip. I'm sending my virtual greetings to him. So this year, Point of Access was one of the first festivals who will try to reconfigure their project, who went online very fast. And so with their help, we managed to present two theater projects online. One was Vidi Lazan's performance called The Aerial F of Swiss artist Simon Zen, which was also about like digitalization and connections with the virtual reality and the virtual body. And the second performance was an adaptation of Rimini Protocol, which is partly a Swiss company. Initially, it was called Calcutta in a Box, but especially for the festival, they made a special edition called Calcutta at Home, and it was a very important participatory event involving Indian artists and local artists and local spectators who could reach the performance from every corner of the world. And we presented this Calcutta at Home 15 times online, which we would never do in present time if we would present it offline. So this first experience was followed by the whole explosion of all kinds of digital formats in different disciplines. Like we had an online residency for design artists, Swiss and Russian ones, online workshops, and even tried to launch online research trips. This is like when a curator is visiting, for example, a performing arts platform in Switzerland, but this time we tried to do it online without like being able to travel. And we will have two very interesting experiences which are in the pipeline, which will happen should happen in October. I hope it will happen. First of all, the Swiss dance company called Bewegrund will participate in the Inclusive Arts Festival at Pushkin Museum with the workshops for dancers with disabilities. And the second experience we will do with the new space of Theater of the Nations in Moscow. It will be a big gathering, big symposium of contemporary dance professionals. And we'll have an international discussion program curated by a Swiss curator, and a lot of Swiss dance professionals and choreographers are expected to join the program online. And these are the things that in normal life, I would say would take us, I don't know, half a year or a year to prepare. And we are very thankful for our partners that helped us to organize it in this very intensive way online. In summer 2012, when the borders were still closed and we didn't know what will happen next, our Moscow office also launched the open call called Fast Forward, which was addressed to artists and independent institutions, both in Switzerland and Russia. And by this initiative, we aim to support new exchange formats and new experimental forms of collaboration during the pandemic that could possibly be done online. And we were very happy to receive more than 60 applications, and 6 of them were selected. Well, unfortunately, I cannot give an example of a theater project because no theater project won. And due to my, well, personal opinion, I think this is also because, well, digital is great, but probably, I mean, creative, these direct connections between the theater institutions, sometimes it takes really a lot of time and effort to build this. If I try, as the program manager, to sum up the experience that we had, like from March till October in our program, I can say that so far this digital experience was quite positive. I don't know if I will be able to tell this, I don't know, in a year or so. We'll see. For example, as a manager and producer, I have to consider that the digital formats are now an integral part of our everyday practices, and we should learn how to use these tools the best way. And it's very interesting to see how this tool will be developed. Also, during these limited mobility times, the digital formats help to give access to wider audiences across borders, and makes the results of our activities well, more visible and reachable, which is always important for us. As an institution, always trying to reach to distant audiences and distant regions. Also, this virtual space became a field for new artistic experiments and new exchanges, and also gave the spectators opportunities to be more involved in the creating process by reacting, voting, being in a dialogue and so on, which is also positive from my point of view. The only negative option that I can see is that probably with the planning, because, well, planning is an important part of our job, and even in pre-COVID times, it was complicated. And now, when planning, we also have to keep in mind this plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A, if everything goes okay, we will do it offline. Plan B, we can do it online, or probably we can interact between the two formats. And well, in the end of my speech, I would like to tell a couple of words about what we plan to do in 2021. As many speakers already said, it's visible that and obvious that we cannot go back to the old life. That means that, well, digital projects and this digital world will be an integrative part of our activities. So we hope that we will support more like screenings or streams of the young Swiss performing artists in collaborations with the festivals. Also during these times, we have a bunch of new Swiss productions that were specially adapted to be performed for the digital audience. In this kind of projects, we also will try to promote. We will also like try to participate in the exchange knowledge platforms going online, and also it will be like a test field for us. Like we will try to do some new projects on the verge of art, science, and technology. So this is like a blank new field, and we are waiting for very positive result. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Thank you so much for very interesting and inspiring notes. Thank you. Now we go on, and it's so wonderful we can travel from one distant part of the world to the other distant part of the world. And I'm saying this because Alvaro Franco from Columbia University is with us since the time of the technical rehearsal. So since very early in the morning, he's with us, and thank you for being with us in the context of this great variety of presentations of a specific project, of the theoretical ideas. Now, I'm very happy to give the virtual floor to you, Alvaro Franco. He's the director of the Dramatic Art Program of the Central University of Columbia. And I'm happy to invite him to share a brief account of Colombian theater and its teaching in times of COVID. Here you go, Alvaro.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. Is anyone hearing me okay? Is it right?
Yes, absolutely wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, as you put it quite correctly, we started at dark here, and now it's broad daylight. And taking the word from Ricky that he was expecting to have dinner, I just have my breakfast. So let's begin. Thank you very much to the organization for having me to share some of the things that have happened within our country since the arrival of the COVID-19 virus here. A brief account. We have to put in context that Colombia has been involved in a low-intensity internal conflict since 1948, and since 1958, between 1958 and 2020, there has been 9 million people victims of this conflict. So this quite shaped the way that we do theater in Colombia, and then we teach theater in Colombia. We are supposed to be a tropical country. It is a fact, but for instance, if some of my esteemed colleagues in this table have read Garcia Marquez' 100 Years of Solitude, you may see the description of Bogota, the capital of Colombia, as a dark gray and rainy city, which I'm living in now. It's quite cold. So we have a lot of variety between our territories. So the theater, the theater movement in Colombia is quite young. You know, it emerges during the 1950s decade. It's really politicized, and I quite relate what Dominic said earlier before. We're now in a high polarized world and a polarized country, because we had we had a peace process between one of our guerrilla groups 5 years ago, and it has divided the country. Regardless to this internal conflict, both artistic and cultural projects has been put aside by the Colombian state. So the subject of funding, public funding, it's quite heavy on us. The initiatives in Colombian theater have been more private initiative. Public theaters exist within some of our main cities, but they are not as abundant as in other countries. So what theater groups have done is to acquire or rent houses to put their venues in those houses. Given this crisis that in Colombia started on early March, in the mid of March, the government issued a lockdown mandate. So everybody had to go to close their venues, and we are in a kind of a grim situation right now, because most of these houses which are rented by these theater groups have had to be returned to their owners. So, and in the Colombian state cultural policy, there is a program that gives some kind of funding to these theater companies or groups, but there is not quite enough to sustain the operation. So the issue of funding here is really heavy. We know that that the lockdown has made us to go to search some creative new ventures. There was in the initial, I think that this is the general view of this panel, that there was some first resistances to this new form of relationships via internet, this new language that we have passed this discussion that this is not theater, you know. So theater, it exists in a physical place, and is a physical meeting between the audience and the performers. But this new medium is going to be developed, and so slowly, theater companies and some of the public theaters have done streamings and early recordings of their previous performances, and the Colombian state has issued some funding towards projects to online theater or online acting. I don't know. I don't know which would be the proper term for this new type of media or language, as you know, as an actor. So it's been quite difficult. And the political climate in Colombia is really heavy right now because of what just I explained earlier. And let's move to the theater teaching, which is my field. We are a part of a national network of theater schools, and as the rest of the world, we have to move to online classes. We have to adapt our practices, our teachings to online teaching. And it was quite a shock for the first 2 or 3 months. There are 14 universities in Colombia that teach, has dramatic arts or theater programs, and there are some non-formal schools that do also. They don't, non-formal meaning that they do not offer a professional degree, title, recognized by the Colombian state. And past these resistances, we managed to creatively try to continue the relationship between us and our students. And that's what happened during the Zoom classes of movement training, acting training, voice training, when from the rehearsal room to this screen, this little space, the stage became your room. The private that was your home, your room, became public to your classmates, to your teacher. The house became a stage. And you have to, as a student and as a teacher, had to transform it in order to stay in touch. you know. So that there is a kind of a Colombian thing that we are really tropical. We are kind of a easygoing people, and what I personally think is that this crisis teach us, especially our students, the need for self-discipline. Self-discipline that is, in this Colombian perspective, was more of musicians, as you may say, tool. But the actor in Colombia didn't have, or at least the student actor didn't have quite a strong self-discipline that made them this crisis made them to enforce that, you know. And this new language that is going to be developed, we, as many of the other people in this panel said, there is no certainty of if this is going to continue, if this is just a tool to get by this crisis, or is it going to move on? Recently, within this network, in this very week, this is the last day of our annual event that we have. And we have been discussing our experiences during this year, how we cope with this crisis, how did we teach our students, how do we move on? And the only conclusion that is that we have our students, both our students and us as teachers, given the limitation of our resources, the technical resources, the internet resources, have creatively made this new virtual space fruitful. So you might see on our website, redcolombia.org, there is is in Spanish mainly. There is an English part of the site, but in one of the major sections now there are some of the projects that some of these schools have done in these past months. To show how they cope with it. They related to audio theater, radio theater, live performances, interactive dialogues between students who are far apart from long in distance. For instance, there is an island here in Colombia called San Andres. There are students there who are attending classes of theater in the Universidad del Atlántico in Barranquilla, which is in the Caribbean coast. So they have to creatively manage to stay in touch. And finally, the only thing that we have to one of the ideas that this crisis has taught us is that there is always uncertainty, which is kind of the late leitmotif of the Colombian history, of modern Colombian history. You know, it's uncertainty all the time, and we have to cope every day and solve these issues every day. Now for a closing statement. We, as a group, as a network of schools in Colombia, we have managed to stay in touch. We have managed to do these meetings annually for 15 years. This is the 15th annual meeting. And what has teach us is that is the deep idea that theater in fact is collaboration. You collectively look for answers to a question plays by an author or plays by the director or plays by the same audience, you know? So collectively, we have searched these answers. We have managed to cope our differences, given this politicized theatrical movement in Colombia. And as a schools, we have been growing stronger and help each other in terms of exchange ideas, exchange teachers, exchange students, mix them all together in these meetings to work together towards just one goal, just to have an active, creative, and artistic life and propositions, you know? So I think that's, I don't know if my presentation has been quite messy. I have to talk without, but it has changed all along from this conversation, because some new ideas came to me during hearing you, all of you. And so for me, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Alvaro. Thank you for sharing your live thoughts with us. And particularly thank you for being with us from your early breakfast until your second breakfast, you know. Appreciate it a lot. And, you know, we are, just like Colombian actors, are trying to be more disciplined, but we're slightly again behind the schedule. And now we're going on to the next and the final talk. This is a difficult and a very important mission. To finish the conference, and this was given to a person who represents the Russian field of international activities, who spent the whole time of the conference with us physically in the Presidium. So the floor is given to, literally, the floor is given to Lisa Rozova, the program director at M-Art Foundation in Russia, with the talk, Bringing Culture Abroad in COVID Times, Alternatives to International Touring.
Thank you so much. First of all,
this is slightly closer to the microphone.
Does it work?
Right.
So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for having me here and participants for really amazing and interesting ideas. And actually, a lot of those ideas echo what I wanted to say, so I will be very brief for the presentation. I hope the colleagues can help with the presentation. Yeah? It just will be easier to follow my talk. So my name is Lisa Rozova. I'm a program director at M-Art Foundation. First of all, I would like to say a few words about our foundation, because many of you might not be actually familiar with it. So our mission in a nutshell is the following. We showcase the best of contemporary Russian culture to a global audience, producing and promoting new artworks in collaboration with leading art institutions. So basically, here it is. But what does it mean in practical terms? In practical terms, it means that we do a lot of touring works. And since our foundation, 2 years ago, in March 2018, we actually presented and produced 53 events in those cities. In Tel Aviv, London, New York, Riga, and Avignon, with a total of audience 25,000. So, as I said, we do a lot of touring work. That's why actually COVID was very big obstacle for us. So just to mention a few highlights of our program, to give you an idea of what we do, here is a few things that we did in past years. One of those, it's Outside, that we co-produced with Avignon Festival. It was presented last year at the festival, got amazing reviews in the press. Then we had, for example, Leonid Desятников concerts in London and in New York. Actually, he has birthday today. Also, we presented a showcase, actually the first showcase of Russian contemporary choreography in Sadler's Wells in London and Suzanne de l'Alcente in Tel Aviv, two legendary venues for dance. And we had an amazing tour of Gogol Center, prominent Moscow theater, to Israel, which was actually a very special moment because normally Russian theater is attended by the Russians, so to say, in Tel Aviv, and we attracted amazing very diverse audience.
So apart from those events, last year we established a new festival in Tel Aviv. The festival is called MOD, and last year it was focused on Russian art, as we are specializing in Russian art, so to say. But the idea was to make it annual festival of international culture. And, sorry, I'm too fast. So here is our festival in kind of names and numbers. We had over 9,000 viewers in 3 weeks. And we presented very diverse program. I'm very proud that we had not only Moscow and St. Petersburg theaters, but we also had brilliant Yekaterinburg theaters, and we had a special guest from Georgia, Rizor Gabriadze Theater. Absolutely legendary. And just to give you an idea of how it looks like, we have a short clip. It's just 1 minute long, but it happened just before the pandemic, just to remember how, how actually festivals looked before that. After this successful festival and our very successful last year, we had very big plans for this year. And we had very ambitious, touring plans for this year. As you can see, we planned a big world tour of Outside. We were invited by Schaubühne Theater in Germany, by Tokyo Festival in Japan. Also US tour of Gogol Center in partnership with New York University, and big US program, and international productions for our festival in Israel, including Simon Stone production. But unfortunately, COVID changed all of that, and we weren't able to present any of those projects. So those projects and big touring events were postponed for 2022. Anyway, as everyone in theater sector, we tried to find a way to continue our work and continue culture collaboration. So we come up with a few things. Actually, all of those things are already been said. I was very happy to hear that we kind of go in the same direction as many of our colleagues. And again, this is not some kind of a result baseline, it's just something that we try to explore. So just very brief 4 directions that we go to. The first one is co-productions. So as an international foundation, we realized that although it's almost impossible to bring things to touring productions, still we can continue doing collaborations with local artists. And we felt that it was a perfect time actually to work closer with them and to give an opportunity for deep and meaningful cultural exchange. As you know, with co-productions this happens. The risks of cancellation are much lower than with the touring, of course, because the premieres are scheduled later, but also they can be very flexible because all the main kind of artists, dancers, actors, they're all local. So they don't have to travel in a big group. We can actually invite 1 or 2 creators, or even some of our creators work by Zoom as well and by digital means. So just to name a few things, we're doing now a co-production with Stanislavski Music Theater, with local dancers, with Moscow dancers, and with Israeli choreographer. We do a co-production with Batsheva Dance Company, absolutely amazing, world-known company, and we hope that we open our festival with them offline, if not possible, then online. We have a very meaningful, I think, co-production with Suzanne Delal Center, leading center for dance, where we bring Russian choreographers to work with local dancers. And also we do a big music collaboration between Russian producers and composers Simple Symmetry and the biggest independent radio in Tel Aviv, TED FM, attracting local instrumentalist musicians. That was very rewarding and nice. And the other thing that we're trying to do is, of course, digital, as everyone. Although I personally feel that it's very difficult to compete with all these other streaming services. Also, it's actually, sometimes it doesn't give justice to the work because there are so many distractions at home. Like if you just watch a work that was filmed, sometimes you don't actually get it. So what we do at the moment, we do a co-production with Baryshnikov Art Center in New York, and we do a digital version of performance that already existed by Vera Martynov. But what we do, it's it's like reconstructed digital version of this performance for viewers at home. And we specifically recorded audio in very high quality, so it can be listened to separately. We have special additional materials from the director Vera Martynov, drafts of this performance, special explanations, quotes, and so on and so forth. So we hope that actually this kind of specifically created digital work can catch someone's attention while watching it from home. And the work will be available from mid-November at Baryshnikov Art Center platform, and then it will be available on our partners platform, Nonfiction. Another thing that I wouldn't go into details, because basically all of our colleagues also do that, but education, because there will be a big international program, educational international program in our festival, because we feel that education events are easy to catch attention than just streaming of archives productions or things like that. And we hope to have, actually, that would be an advantage of COVID, because we will be able to get very diverse international group of people with lectures, masterclasses, and so on and so forth. And another thing that we're trying, as most of speakers today, it's new formats. So at the moment we produce Remote Tel Aviv by a famous German company, Rimini Protocol. It was a big hit in Moscow, of course, and even in times of pandemic, we will be able to present this work, because, 20 people with social distance, they still can work, hopefully, around the city. And that would be our first try at something like that. But also, at the moment, we're working on commissioning a number of Russian directors to create new audio and immersive performances. As well as it was mentioned, I think, by Christopher, about new venues for theater. Also, we're looking at combining theater with installation-like thing. So it would be actually 20 people having this kind of art installation experience, and hopefully it can be done even in these difficult times. So that's more or less directions that we go into, and I was very happy to know that my colleagues also feel that these directions are actually feasible. So thank you so much. That's it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Lisa. Right now we approach very close to the end of our talk. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a big discussion about the topics. I have some time just to make some final notices. What we see here, that we all, and you're absolutely right, we all are very, very close in our thoughts how to work, how to live in this situation. Some people say that this is not theater, what is created on the digital formats and offline. Some say that this is a new theater, but everybody wants to build something on this ground. Everybody wants to work, to try all these new formats and new forms, and everybody wants to build cooperation, continue. And there are some new concepts which I wanted to discuss in this discussion, but next time, maybe next time we'll have more time to discuss, particularly the concept of, for instance, a new sincerity of the audience, which is now debated. We had a talk with Nika Barkhamovsky and some others. The new sincerity of the audience, they are more close to the event through digital means. They can leave the event without distorting its structure, you know, and they are more direct and more close, so to say. And another thing which is very interesting and impressive that was told, for instance, by Ricardo Abad, the state of not independence, which is the classical value of democracy, but interdependence, which is the new state of digital democracy. We're not afraid of being dependent, but to be interdependent is great, is a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful ground to create something. So lots of interesting and bright ideas are heard, and as my colleagues, online and offline. And now it's time to thank many people who took efforts to organize this event. On the first place, Theatre Baltic House, Theatre Festival Baltic House in St. Petersburg, its director, General Sergei Shub, and all the administration. And let me say special thanks to technically saying the battery of this event, Karina Virigina, who is now working, who was in contact with everybody in our wonderful company, wonderful team. I just want to thank all my colleagues, online and offline, who took part in the conference, particularly those from the ITI, from the Network of Higher Education of Performing Arts, people from all institutes and funds from St. Petersburg and Moscow and all over the world who joined us at this meeting. And I would like to thank technical specialists. You know, when we have online events, nobody's here except for technical specialists. There's a lot of them just to be able for us to stay connected. And I would like to thank all technicians, and my special thanks go to our interpreters who worked a lot these hours. Marina Golik and Ekaterina Bereznikova, thank you so much for your efforts, for your work. So I see everybody on the screen and in front of me here in the audience. Thank you very much for participating in this wonderful event. And the last note is this event is recorded and will be published, and the you can see where in the chat section of this event. So it is recorded and will be with us. And what we feel together now, that inside digital communication, there's still a lot real, emotional, and many things that happen just like in real life. Because this is a real life, just in the new format, this digital communication. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. And let's say it's finished. Thank you. Спасибо вам большое.